academic, pseudo-academic, social justice, anti-social justice, scientific, humanities, and weirdly or perhaps not weirdly, hacker sites on the internet are all of a flutter over a new academic hoax in the tradition of the Sokal Affair and the Conceptual Penis. Maybe you don't know what those are. If you're watching this channel, odds are you do, but a quick rundown is probably necessary. The Sokal Affair was when a scientist put together a hoax paper on postmodernist theory. It was just a bunch of jargon thrown together and managed to get it published in a journal. So this, to many people's mind, exposed that there was a paucity of academic rigor, of scientific methodology, or even of sense, or even a pretense in these kind of arenas. Unfortunately, many of the social sciences, the humanities, these kind of things. But that was only one incident, and so it didn't really get a lot of traction. It's well known amongst critics of the methodologies of these studies, but less so more broadly. The Conceptual Penis was a much cruder kind of thing, and it only managed to get published in a less reputable online journal, the kind of one where you can kind of pay to have your papers published. So that didn't get a lot of traction, though it did stir the waters in the online commentary community. But this was a much more systematic approach to exposing these problems, addressing the concerns of these previous issues. In the issue of the Sokal Affair, that it was just one, and in the issue of the Conceptual Penis, that it wasn't published in a reputable journal. So several people, including Helen Pluckrose and Peter Boghossian, I can't remember the third guy, I'll look it up in a sec, they went about this much more systematically. They submitted 20 and would have submitted more papers that were all designed to be hoaxes, in that they were ridiculous, absurd, presented things that were quite offensive sometimes reworking chapters from Mein Kampf into modern feminist or other social justice terminology and trying to get them published. Of this 27 were accepted, others received revisions and were treated seriously, and so on. And unfortunately, the experiment had to be brought to an end before it reached its conclusion because they were found out. But still, we can put these three events together, the Sokal Affair, the Conceptual Penis, and now this, and we can see, I believe, that there is very definitely a problem with methodology, with oversight, with peer review, with proper scientific and academic rigor within the fields of the social sciences, the humanities, and so forth.
Trust me, madam, your underwear is in good hands.
Anyway, there's a long but very worthwhile to read article at Ario magazine, which I'll link below if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're not watching on YouTube, go and watch on YouTube. Channel's post-mortem video. So that article is kind of a summary of everything put together, but it's for a general audience, so it doesn't go into the full and absolute depth that you might expect. James Lindsay is the third person that was involved. I believe he was involved in the Conceptual Penis hoax. One thing I found particularly funny was that they had a paper that they submitted about hoaxes. So it all gets a bit meta there. But there's one thing I really want to pluck out from the whole thing and to examine. A lot of people tend to think that this is kind of rarefied bullshit, that it doesn't escape from the institutions, that it's limited in scope to the universities, to students, to radicals. And they spend some time in this article pointing out that this does affect the real world. And I think it certainly does. We're seeing that creep into much more common use of language, much more common understanding of the society in which we live. You will see people unironically use the redefinition of racism to prejudice plus power, while often being virulently racist themselves, and the same with other isms, sexism, and so forth. you will find people, unironically and honestly, who haven't been through these courses, invoking the patriarchy conspiracy theory, with a completely straight face. That's an effect on the real world, and it's beginning to affect certainly our social systems of interaction, and even our legal systems of interaction, and has done for some time. I mean, to invoke the lightning rod issue of the moment, the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, none of us know what he did or didn't do, but in a Me Too atmosphere, informed by this pseudo-academia, the idea of due process, of innocent until proven guilty, as a general principle, not necessarily limited to when someone's on trial. I mean, he is in essence on trial for his suitability for this position. But whatever you feel about that, we don't know what he did or didn't do at all, but he is being presumed to be guilty on the basis of mere accusations. And that's all. And this is shaping policy. It shapes the way that people interact with the world. If you watched the MythCon panel, and if you didn't, you should go and watch it, there was a BLM activist, I'm afraid I forget her name, opposite some black guy whose philosophy just seems to be chill and everything will work out. But the stuff dropping out of her mouth, there's an old story from a book of fairy stories, Tales from Tartary, I think. There were two sisters. One was rewarded by a witch, one was cursed by a witch. One girl, every time she spoke, a diamond fell from her mouth, so her family became wealthy. Her other sister got incredibly jealous, went off to the witch, didn't treat her well, got cursed. Every time she spoke, a lump of dung would fall out of her mouth. That's what it was like watching this woman speak. This bullshit. And yet she thinks that that's how the world works, not on the basis of any hard and fast scientific evidence, any objectivity, any genuine academic work. Just that's what she believes, that's what's been confirmed, reconfirmed, and pressed upon her. And she regarded some black guy, ironically, as being the person who had been indoctrinated against these things that she considered to be obvious. But yeah, you can see that these things have an effect on the real world because it's shifting people's perception of the world, but it's a perception that's wrong. Very wrong. At least so far as the facts can reveal.
Is there a doctor in the fish?
Now, as it happens, all of this coincided nicely with an argument that I'd been having with some old friends on Facebook about the misuse of the term privilege. Things like white privilege, male privilege. At least in Western societies, these things don't exist, and privilege has a very specific meaning, which they're not using. They're trying to invoke advantage, which isn't a perfect term, but it's better than privilege, and you can still argue the toss over whether that's the true state of affairs or not. But I made a kind of flip comment there that a better name for what these kind of discussions, what these kind of accusations towards groups in society would be Munchhausen's by proxy. And Munchausen syndrome is, well, it's called something different now, can't remember. Munchausen syndrome is a madness where you imagine yourself to have some particular problem. You may believe yourself to be infested with parasites or have a particular medical issue that you don't actually have, but you're absolutely convicted and convinced. You learn the medical terminology, you learn to fake it and all of these things in a lot of ways, but you're not actually sick. Munchausen's by proxy is when someone, typically a carer, often an abusive parent or an overprotective parent even, convinces someone else that they are sick. Now, this is all at the personal level, but I think hopefully we could all agree that societies and large groups of people can also go mad. Mass hysteria is a thing. Marian apparitions, where people believe en masse that they've seen the Virgin Mary appear in the sky, whatever. These are things that happen. The flat earthers are an example of a contagious madness. Religion is a contagious madness. Societies become deranged. Many societies are run on the basis of religion and impose it upon others. So I think we can see how madness can infect and influence a society as a whole. And when we're looking at real world effects and we look at what's being claimed in these instances, I think we can see a societal scale Munchausen's by proxy. Because they're going in and they're convincing people that they have a problem that, when you look at the statistics, objectively doesn't really exist. People blame race or gender when it comes down to personal choices which are more widely available in a more liberal country, or it comes down to class and wealth, but it's disguised as race. Pushing these kind of ideas that someone is better off than you for unfair reasons without anything to back it up. I mean, there are genuine reasons which we can examine and we can potentially solve, but pushing this onto people just increases grievance, like they rightly call it, grievance studies in the articles that they put out. This divides, it doesn't bring people together. Insisting that you treat everyone differently because of their innate inherent characteristics, rather than saying treat everybody the same, give everyone the same rights and so on, this only breeds division, resentment. It's not helpful. It is societal Munchausen by proxy, convincing people that they're oppressed when they're not. And if the academia that looks into this kind of thing is so poor, if the scientific methodology is not present, if it's all about reconfirming your biases, then you might as well work for the Creation Institute as anyone else. And how are we supposed to find the truth if people are looking to confirm their biases? That's what's dangerous. That's what affects the real world. Creating groups of people who, in some cases, feel guilty for no reason and for nothing more than being white or male or cisgender or heterosexual or whatever, and beat themselves up about it, and entrench ideas of grievance and hatred and revenge in groups that would be much better off without it. So I think that's what I'm going to start referring to this as, when there's no basis, when there's no grounding for it, when there's other explanations, when it melts like butter in a blowtorch, when you apply the least bit of skepticism. I'm going to call it societal Munchausen by proxy. Zang.
Have you any famous last words?
Not yet.
Not yet? Is that famous?
The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hot for you here. The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hot for you, Joni, my dear.
This is horrible what happened today. See, I don't like I have, okay, like a lot of you, I hate a lot, you know? But I hate with style and creativity. Yeah!